July 3rd, 1908. LA, California. The sun was barely up when the hotel maid screamed. Inside room 12 of the Hotel Dennis, the scene was chillingly quiet. Charles D. Chick Jones sat slumped forward in a wooden chair, a revolver on the floor. A single bullet wound through the head. The smell of smoke still clung to the walls. No note, no sign of struggle, and no blood spatter pattern that anyone thought to question. The police declared it suicide. Within hours, the case was closed. But Chick's friends didn't buy it. Not for a second. Just days before, he told them he was sitting on a story that would shatter the state's power structure. A tangled conspiracy that reached into California's courts, railroads, press rooms, and campaign coffers. He said he was close to breaking it wide open, and even gave it a name. The Octopus. Back in 1901, novelist Frank Norris published a book titled The Octopus, a story of California. It was labeled fiction, but barely. The book detailed how the Southern Pacific Railroad had wrapped its tentacles around the state, controlling everything from wheat prices to legal decisions. It was a scathing portrait of monopoly power dressed up as literature. And in the early 1900s, it didn't take much for readers to connect the dots. Everyone in California already knew the truth. The railroad wasn't just transportation, it was government. Frank Norris died a year later, unexpectedly, from a ruptured appendix. But his novel lived on, and with it, the image of a many-armed monster suffocating California. Chick Jones believed that monster was still alive. Worse, he believed Norris had only seen one of its arms. Jones thought the real octopus went deeper. He said it wasn't just Southern Pacific. It was oilmen, bankers, judges, political kingmakers, and they weren't just influencing California. They were running it. Which, if you ask me, it's probably still the same. Chick wasn't your typical journalist. He'd bounce between papers across the state, using aliases, chasing rumors, and following whispers other reporters ignored. He was smart, obsessive, and, according to some, already in over his head. By 1907, he began publishing a series of anonymous exposés alleging a statewide conspiracy involving land theft, railroad kickbacks, and judicial bribes. His tone wasn't careful, it was defiant. He named names, some of them powerful. Behind the scenes, Chick claimed to have documentation, payoff ledgers, land contracts, even letters between officials that proved how deep the corruption went. He believed he was tracing not just a series of crimes, but the structure of something larger, an engine behind the curtain. He told a friend over drinks in late June, quote, "There's more than just graft. There's coordination. This is organized. It has layers." He believed it wasn't just about profit. It was about control. Chick feared he was being followed. He stopped trusting phones, started walking instead of taking trolleys. He wrote his articles from different locations each night. In one letter to a friend in Chicago, he wrote, quote, "If anything happens to me, the octopus did it." Anytime somebody writes a letter like that to somebody, usually, somebody unalived them, that they were, what's the word I'm looking for? Investigating. Usually how it happens. I'm not investigating anybody. Don't come after me. I'm happy. I've got my dog. I love her. Okay? So, if something happens to me and it seems kind of suspicious. On the evening of July 2nd, Chick checked into the Hotel Dennis. He paid in cash, brought only a small bag, and told the clerk he wouldn't be staying long. That same night, he was supposed to meet with a source, a man who never showed. By morning, Chick was dead. The official cause? Unaliving himself, for YouTube's sake. But the details, well, that didn't make sense. He had no known history of depression. He just leased new office space and ordered custom printing plates. He'd scheduled 2 interviews for later that week. The pistol used didn't have his fingerprints, and then there was what was missing. Chick was never without his notes. Reams of scribed shorthand, newspaper clippings, legal transcripts. He carried them everywhere. But when police searched his room, there wasn't a single document, not even a scrap of paper. Witnesses said they'd seen 2 well-dressed men arrive at the hotel late that night, asking the clerk which room Chick was in. One carried a black leather briefcase. Neither signed the guest book. Police never looked for them. The entire investigation lasted less than 24 hours. And then, just like that, it was over. Chick had made promises. He told friends he mailed out backup documents to trusted allies, one in Chicago and one in Washington, D.C. Neither recipient ever came forward. Years later, a former reporter from the San Francisco Bulletin claimed he'd seen a draft Chick was working on the week before his death. The headline read, "Syndicate Behind the State Scandal. Rail, Oil, and Bench in Secret Pact." The story never ran. The original was never found. Chick's family, when they asked for his belongings, received only his overcoat, a pocket watch, and an empty notepad. A rival journalist, writing in a private letter years later, said he had the story, or at least he thought he did. But when you corner the machine doesn't argue, it deletes. No editors pushed back. No lawsuits were filed. And the story died as quietly as its writer. To understand why Chick's story mattered, you have to understand who he was fighting. The Southern Pacific Railroad was more than a business. It owned massive swaths of land, hired private security, and had lobbyists writing laws in Sacramento. County sheriffs owed their jobs to it. Local papers depended on its advertising. The Bank of Italy, which would later become Bank of America, was consolidating smaller banks and controlling credit lines for entire farming regions. It worked hand in hand with the railroad to decide who got loans and who lost their land. Standard Oil was muscling into the California market, and their tactics made headlines nationwide. Jones believed these groups weren't competitors, they were collaborators. Some historians today refer to it as the California Combine, a convergence of financial, judicial, and corporate power that operated without transparency and with impunity. Chick believed he'd found the outlines of this monster, but where others saw influence, he saw conspiracy, and it scared him. There are only fragments left of what Chick uncovered. A Sacramento lawyer, years later, claimed to have seen a photocopy of a ledger Jones had compiled. It allegedly listed monthly payments to 3 state judges, 2 newspaper editors, and a U.S. senator. At the top of each page, SPR. A retired typesetter said he had once prepared a headline for Chick that read, "The octopus is real." It never went to print, but in the 1930s, a letter surfaced claiming to have been written by Chick the night before his death. In it, he wrote, "They are here. If this is found, know that I did not take my own life. The trail runs through the courts, the rail, and the banks. Follow the ink trail." No one could verify the letter, but for those who knew Chick, it sounded like him. For a long time, no one talked about Chick Jones. Editors wouldn't print his name. Friends stopped asking questions. And just like that, he disappeared. Chick Jones doesn't have a statue. No one's named a press room after him. There are no documentaries, no scholarly books, no markers where he died. But what he feared, that the octopus was real, still resonates. The image of a shadowy force with unseen arms pulling strings behind the scenes has become a cultural constant. We used it to describe everything now: media monopolies, political corruption, corporate influence, and digital surveillance. But before it was a metaphor, it was a real warning, a name whispered by a journalist whose voice was silenced. Chick believed that systems built in secret couldn't be reformed from within. They had to be dragged into the light. He didn't get the chance, and the machine he tried to expose is still evolving. We'll never know for sure what Chick D. Jones found. We don't know who erased him, or how far that conspiracy reached. But what we do know is, he wasn't the only one to die with a story still inside him, and he won't be the last. In the end, Chick left behind only 2 things: questions and a single unfinished phrase. The octopus is real. And maybe, in a way, that was the story all along. Maybe just that phrase, "the octopus is real," will open up people to maybe dig a little bit deeper. Without Chick's story, we will never truly know how deep it went. This was Cracked Relic, and this was the story about the octopus that silenced the reporter. As always, sources will be in the description and coming up after this. And thank you for watching.